name is Björk, and your television is just about to explode!
On a humid September day in 1996, police in Hollywood, Florida forced open the door of a small, cluttered apartment. Inside, they stumbled upon a scene of horror that would soon capture headlines worldwide. 21-year-old Ricardo López lay dead on the floor, a victim of by gunshot, and a series of videotapes he left behind would become an entryway into his deep spiral of obsession and madness. The tapes revealed López's obsessive love for Icelandic pop icon Björk and his drastic plan to harm her. The Björk Stalker case stands as one of the most unsettling examples of fan obsession. In today's video, we'll recount the timeline of this case while exploring the psychological aspects behind López's descent. The story of Ricardo López is tragic, and it forces us to ask, just how far can fans go before their obsession turns manic? Ricardo López was an introverted young man. Born in Uruguay and raised in the United States, López was shy and felt socially inadequate, especially around women. He was an ordinary pest control worker with low self-esteem, describing himself in his private writings as a loser who never even learned to drive. From his teenage years, he sought escape in fantasies and became enthralled by celebrities. Before Björk, he had fixated on Hollywood actress Gina Davis, but that infatuation eventually faded. Everything changed in 1993 when López discovered Björk, an Icelandic pop star whose music and persona captivated him. What started as fan admiration quickly grew into something darker. López wrote hundreds of pages in his diary about Björk, 803 pages in total, pouring out his feelings of inadequacy and adoration. In those pages, he obsessively mentioned Björk 408 times, alongside 168 references to his own sense of failure and even 14 references to murder. He began calling Björk his muse, finding in her a source of inspiration and euphoria. By his own account, simply thinking about her gave him a euphoric feeling, a temporary escape from his mundane life. Yet, as he poured more of himself into this one-sided fantasy, López drifted further from reality. In his writings, he imagined bizarre scenarios, even a time machine in which he would travel back in time and befriend Björk as a child. Despite the intensity of his fixation, López insisted his love for Björk was pure and non-sexual. He wrote, "I couldn't have sex with Björk because I love her." This statement hinted at a reverence that placed Björk on a pedestal as an almost untouchable figure in his mind. Through the mid-1990s, López lived more in his fantasy world than in reality. He sent Björk numerous fan letters that went unanswered. Each day, he retreated to a small apartment, imagining an emotional connection with a woman he had never met. Friends and family knew he was obsessed with the singer, but they perceived it was a quirky hobby rather than a dangerous delusion. In truth, Ricardo López's mental state was deteriorating. He was depressed, socially isolated, and increasingly prone to violent thoughts that he kept to himself. The seed of obsession had been planted, and under the right conditions, it would grow into something deadly. In January 1996, on his 21st birthday, López embarked on a new project. He began recording a video diary in place of his written one. Over the next 9 months, he documented his every thought on camera, documenting his obsession and unintentionally his unraveling mind. Speaking to the camera in his cramped apartment, he saw it as a friend. He explained that these tapes were a documentation of my life, of my art, and of my plans, and confessed, "Comfort is what I seek in speaking to you." The video diary became the stage on which his private fantasies and demons played out. Viewers of these tapes, which totaled about 22 hours of footage, would later witness López laughing, crying, raging, and sinking deeper into despair as he talked about Björk and his own perceived failures. A turning point came when López read an Entertainment Weekly article announcing that Björk had a romantic relationship with Goldie, a British musician of mixed race. This news was devastating to him. In his mind, Björk had betrayed him, and with someone he irrationally despised due to racist hatred. This revelation ignited a frightening change. The obsessive fan turned into a resentful one almost overnight. López furiously scrolled in his diary, "I wasted 8 months and she has a fucking lover." That sense of betrayal, though unfounded, sparked anger and racism in him. He felt humiliated and enraged that Björk, the woman he idolized, was involved with another man, and in his eyes, a man that he viewed as inferior because of his racist ideology. This is when López's obsession took a dark turn. He fixated on a new goal. He must punish Björk for what he saw as her wrongdoing. In 1996, López's video diary entries grew more ominous. He stopped writing in his paper journal and focused entirely on filming his every move. On camera, he began to present his plan. His infatuation had twisted into delusion and hate. In one chilling entry, he stated very calmly, "I'm just going to have to kill her. I'm going to have to send a package. I'm going to be sending her to hell." These words illustrate the depths of his distorted thinking. López now believed that murdering Björk was not only necessary, but justified. He also saw it as a way to matter in her life, a final, violent act that would ensure he had an effect on her life as he once yearned for. López's plot became methodical. Initially, he fantasized about an elaborate device, a bomb filled with HIV-infected needles that would inject Björk with the virus. He liked the idea of causing lasting suffering, however, that scheme proved too complicated, so he settled on a simpler but still deadly one instead, a letter bomb, using sulfuric acid hidden inside a hollowed-out book. The plan was fiendish. When Björk, or whoever opened the package, lifted the book's cover, a trigger would cause a vial of acid to explode, potentially disfiguring or even killing the person in front of it. Ricardo López poured all of his focus into building this device in the summer of 1996. His videotapes show him preparing the bomb step by step. During this period, his appearance and demeanor deteriorated. He gained weight, let his apartment fall into disarray, and spoke often of and martyrdom. He had resolved that after carrying out his revenge, he would take his own life, hoping that in death, he and Björk would be spiritually united in heaven. This belief underscored how unhinged his mind had become. He pictured a post-mortem reunion with the celebrity who had no idea he even existed. By early summer 1996, everything was ready for the final act. On the morning of September 12, 1996, Ricardo López pressed record on his camcorder one final time. The tape labeled "Last Day, Ricardo López" captured his final hours. In the video, he is visibly anxious yet determined. He addresses the camera and announces that today is the day he will mail the lethal package. Just before leaving for the post office, he admits, quote, "I'm very, very nervous," and notes that if anything goes wrong or if he's caught, he'd rather kill than face arrest. With the camera still running, López leaves to send off the package addressed to Björk's London home. He returns to the apartment having successfully mailed the bomb, his fate now sealed, along with a deadly letter on its way across the Atlantic. What followed is perhaps the most harrowing scene of this entire saga. Recorded in real time on that final video, with Björk's music playing loudly in the background, Ricardo López removed all of his clothing and, in a ritualistic act, shaves his head and eyebrows on camera. He then proceeds to paint his face in streaks of red and green. Investigators later speculated that he did this to make himself harder to recognize. The atmosphere of the video is very surreal and especially haunting. Björk's song echoes in the room while López, naked and painted, speaks to the camera with unnerving calmness. "I know exactly what I'm doing. He then shows the camera his gun, a .38 caliber revolver, and says that it's ready to roll. As Björk's song I Remember You comes to an end on his stereo, López faces the camera and suddenly shouts, "Victory." In that instant, he places the revolver in his mouth and pulls the trigger, filming his own violence. The gunshot echoes in the tiny apartment. López collapses to the floor. Off camera, we can hear him groan, and then the tape abruptly cuts off. Ricardo López had carried out his plans. Yet, the story does not conclude with his death. In fact, the most critical moments were yet to come. Moments that would determine whether Björk herself would fall victim to his scheme. For 4 days, López's body was undiscovered in his apartment, as the tapes and letters awaited someone to find them. On the 16th of September, 1996, the neighbors noticed a foul odor seeping from López's unit and saw blood pouring under the door. Rightfully concerned, the apartment manager led the police inside the apartment. There, they found the remains of Ricardo López, along with a stark warning scrawled on the wall. The 8mm tapes are a documentation of a crime, terrorist material. They are for the FBI. López had essentially left a note directing authorities to watch his recorded diaries to understand what he had done. Police immediately evacuated the building and called in a bomb squad, fearing the apartment might have been booby-trapped. Thankfully, there were no additional explosives found. However, upon viewing the final videotape, the Hollywood Police Department realized that a live bomb was now in transit headed for Björk's residence in London. A race against time began. The Florida authorities alerted Scotland Yard in London, providing details of the package and its destination. Fortunately, the warning came just in time. The parcel had not yet reached Björk's residence. It was intercepted at a South London post-sorting facility and safely detonated by the Metropolitan Police Bomb Squad. Björk was never in any physical danger. Unbeknownst to López, his deadly plan was always likely to fail. Björk's team had measures in place, and ironically, Björk and Goldie had even broken up days before López had killed himself. News of the foiled attack and the stalker reached Björk within days. On September 18, 1996, the singer appeared outside her London home to speak to a cluster of press members.
I just find it very sad that people get in that kind of state, you know. I was more worried about my son, really, but he seemed to deal with it in a very brave manner. Well, it's just kind of a very sad thing, you know, obviously when somebody shoots their face off, you know. It's terrible. I'm not sure if I'll dream very properly for a while.
She called the situation terrible and very sad, and expressed sympathy for López's family, even sending them flowers and a card in condolence. Deeply disturbed by the incident, Björk temporarily withdrew from the public eye. She flew to Spain to finish recording her album Homogenic, away from media attention. Security around her was tightened, as she hired a bodyguard to escort her young son to school, not taking any chances in the wake of the scare. The event had rattled her. I'd be lying if I said it didn't scare the fuck out of me. The public reaction to the case was one of shock and morbid fascination. Here was a story almost too strange to believe. A shy, awkward fan becomes a would-be murderer, leaving behind hours of video confession and nearly killing a famous singer from across the ocean. In the days and weeks after, media coverage exploded. Headlines dubbed López the Björk Stalker. The Björk Stalker case is a story as tragic as it is cautionary. It began with the quiet loneliness of Ricardo López, a man who felt insignificant in the world, and ended in a plot that could have taken a life, along with the loss of his own. And what adds to the horror is that each step was documented in painful detail by the stalker himself. Ultimately, the tale of Ricardo López's obsession with Björk reminds us that celebrities, while adored by millions, can attract a dangerous fixation from isolated individuals. This story will and should continue to be retold, not to sensationalize a morbid event, but to remember how important it is to seek help for those in psychological distress and to never underestimate the impact of untreated mental illness mingled with celebrity worship. In the end, all of this pain arose from a young man's longing to matter. Perhaps, by learning from this case, we can help others find meaning in far healthier ways, long before they ever reach a breaking point of no return.